All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome. Welcome to another live lesson here on the EC Abrams YouTube channel. I'm Evan Abrams, although I think people know that if they're tuning in. I don't know why I say my own name. It annoys even me. So, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Let me know where you're from, what you do. Good to see Andrew back in the stream. Big fan of the stream, Andrew. Love having you here. It's great. But yeah, just jump into the chat. If you ever have questions, today we're talking about pre-production. We're talking about the steps that you take to get wonderful ideas out of your head and onto the screen or into After Effects, or maybe it doesn't even use After Effects. You know, it's just about figuring out part of that process, and that's all part of pre-production. So we'll just angle this so I can read the chat better. There is a bit of a delay today. There is, it's about 10 to 20 seconds. So if I seem a little out of touch with what's on the chat, that is why. And yeah, let's get it going. Oh, we got people here from Edinburgh. Make America motion again. Yeah, that could be a thing. But yeah, everybody in the chat, if you have questions about things, let me know. But thankfully, I've talked about pre-production a lot. This is a regular talk I give, so I'll start with that. And as things come up, just jump in and let me know. And if you have any specific questions about your pre-production workflow, anything you want to throw out, we can definitely get into it. So it's wide open. Oh, people from Bangladesh, people from Ukraine, Russia as well. So also let me know how your World Cup team is doing throughout the day. That's also important. All right, folks watching from the Philippines, a lot of people in here. This is great. So let's start by talking about what pre-production is. Let's get right into some content here. Pre-production are all of the stages that you will take before you actually end up animating something or before you end up committing a lot of time into something. Pre-production is important. It's important in client services because it lets you get a lot of thoughts out of the way. It lets you communicate back and forth with the client before you get really committed down one road. The pre-production phase is where you sort of iron out what the specific things you're going to do are. This is everything from creating a script up to storyboards and many things in between, animatics. We're talking about AV scripts. We're talking about all these little documents, these drawings that happen before any production actually happens. All right. Oh, got lots of things going on in the chat. I should probably be closer so I can actually read what this says here. Mono sound on left channel. Don't really know how to fix that. We have a new audio setup here. In case you haven't noticed, this is a wonderful new microphone. I wonder how I would change that. Properties? I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to change that. Should have looked into that before we started. The audio is probably going to be way out of sync. YouTube is telling me they're having some trubs today, so we may have a lot of synchronization problems. So we will try to deal. We'll try to deal with that, but we'll see how it goes. So let's jump into the topic of today. Let's jump into pre-production. Most times you want to start with a script of some kind, which means you're starting by writing down either words or VO that are going to be happening. And we are going to get into some samples. That's right. It's definitely going to be happening. So a lot of people really mixed reviews of how the stream is going. So for pre-production, you want to start with a script or at least an idea of the content you're going to create. So generally in motion graphics pieces, there is a VO of some kind, or there is some form of content that we want to put out, some form of information. For pieces that are more visually driven, it might not have a script. There might be no words being said. There might be no textual content to it. But I will say that you still should be writing down some kind of textual content, what will happen in the piece. And whether you're working for a client or you're creating a portfolio piece for yourself, or this is a strange art project, whatever the thing is, I highly recommend going through pre-production steps. Opening up After Effects and playing around is fine if you're just experimenting with form and technique and you're just playing around. But if you want to get something done, a formalized process is going to help you get it done better and actually quicker than you might think. There's a common misconception that people are that it's not time efficient to spend a lot of time in pre-production. Well, it's not time efficient to try to change course in the middle of animating either. Having a solid plan and sticking to it is going to be much more efficient for your time than just diving in and then floundering like a fish as it dives. Fish are actually fine if they dive into water, but that's something else. So, moving on, if you had, let's say you start with a script, someone hands you a lovely piece of paper with words written on it and they love the words, but someone's asking, do you make an animatic or do you create animation right off your head? Absolutely not. I would never create animation right off the top of my head. That would be horrifying for me to do. It would be like a slow drip of sadness coming out, and nothing would be very good. It really helps to actually go through the steps there, Studio XP. So it's definitely helpful. So let's say you start with a script. Very, very beginning stuff. You have a script, you have words written down. Maybe you've written the words, maybe someone else has written the words. The first thing you want to do is actually refine that script into something that translates better into animation. Not a lot of things kind of translate well. Sometimes there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of excess words, there's a lot of passive voice being used. You want to make sure that the script is as good as it can be before you end up having to convert the things it's talking about into visual ideas, because some ideas just won't work. Andrew jumping in here. Yeah, just transcribing what people are saying. It helps, Andrew. So yeah, having these kinds of things can really help get you over the humps. All right, so moving it right along. After you've got a script, you need to convert that into a second kind of document that we call the AV script. And an AV script is just two columns. One column says what is being said, and one is what we're going to see. Pretty simple stuff, right? Audio, visual, AV script, easy stuff. So I thought a nice little exercise for us here on the stream is, why don't we do some of one together? As a team, we'll work together to make that happen. And without further ado, I should probably just share my desktop and we can see what that is. So hopefully you can see this pretty well. I'm not sure really how that's going to look. Let me just zoom in a bunch, I guess. So this is what an AV script would look like generally. So it is audio on one side, the thing being said, video on the other. So this is what it would look like if, example of things that work when scripting. That's a good, see, Ratlin? Ratlin is asking example of things that won't work when scripting, what pitfalls to look for. So look for any sentences or statements that don't really say anything or that are reiterating previous sentences. So often in writing, we feel, we have this need to just beat people over the head with our points, to restate the same thing several times. You might end up having 3 sentences that say the same thing. You can remove 2 of those. You have to rely on the visuals to convey some of the meaning that's going to be present, right? Usually you can get by with half or a third of as many words as you're using. Something else to look for when writing is to remove large compound sentences. So when you have 2 clauses together, you could make this shorter by just having 2 simple sentences rather than 1 long compound sentence. There are a lot of good tips on writing if you look at sort of how news is structured. Looking at news content, because they use very short sentences, getting all the information, subject, verb, object, very simple stuff. And it becomes easier to animate when there's just less fluff to fill over, when it's, this person is going on for 10 words, which could have been done in 3 words. You cut a bunch of those words out, suddenly it's easier to put visuals with the thing that they're saying because the concepts they're talking about are more straightforward and normal. Other things to look out for are long lists separated by commas. Those can be helpful when you're going to say, our product modernizes, streamlines, and et ceteras. So that's an easy excuse to just pop 3 images onto screen about modernizing something and that third thing I said. But these things sometimes don't really say anything. So you want to make sure that the script can stand on its own. So if you closed your eyes and just listened to it, it would be perfectly fine without visuals, and that the visuals will then add to rather than fix what is wrong with the scripting. So that's kind of the idea. All right. So we are going to so we're going to get into this script. We're going to talk a little bit about AV scripting, and I think Paul, you might recognize what script this is. This is Luckiest Man, the speech given by Lou Gehrig when he retired. Lou Gehrig is was a baseball player, who famously had, I think, ALS is his disease, Lou Gehrig's disease. They named it after him. And he gave this very impassioned speech on the ball diamond. I use this example only because the audio is open source and available. It's in the public domain now, I believe. And the speech is readily available. And the speech reads very quickly. It's maybe a minute long when he says it. And he has good cadence. So it's kind of worth having a check out if you're looking for something to animate along to as practice. But we start... I've used it before. I think I might have. This is an example I do go to fairly often when I'm talking about this kind of thing. See, we got some other questions in here. Yeah, I did use it in the other pre-production stream. It's one of my favorite things to go to. Also, I find it very evocative. I'm a baseball fan, so what can I tell you? So let's go through this together and do some of the AV scripting. Generally, what you want to do is just think about what is evocative, what is the purpose of each of these sort of phrases. We've kind of broken it up into their individual sentences so that we're able to time things out sort of accordingly, that each of these blocks, we kind of know how long each of them will be, and we're sort of able to accurately understand, what is the content of this message, so what can we put on screen next to it, right? So hopefully that works. Oh man, Andrew, are you also a fan of baseball? Hopefully you are also a Giants fan. All right, let's see here. What's going on in the chat? Great idea. Great way to practice. Yeah, pulling famous speeches is great. So, without further ado, let's have some ideas. If you have ideas for what would go in here, you let me know in the chat, and we will punch some of them in. Something I would recommend is to always start with some kind of framing or establishing shot. This is sort of where you need to put on your director cinematographer hat and start to think kind of like a director. What would I see going on here? And so yeah, what can we do? What would you establish the scene as? You could go very literally. And you could say, yeah, newspaper flopping down, that could be a thing. So what you would do is you just write in here, we've got newspaper flops down, maybe a picture of Lou giving the speech. And we might say headlines of ALS diagnosis, other headlines to match era, so that we can kind of place where we are in time, where we are in space, so the viewer kind of knows what we're doing. Oh, yeah, and Grayson is also suggesting, here's another suggestion, and as you come up with ideas, I'm going to recommend this as well. You can insert another column and give yourself alternates. So at this stage, it costs you nothing to make more columns to write in alternate ideas. And, and it can be very helpful to just come up with these alternate takes, these alternate thoughts. Maybe there's another thing that we could have. So, wide open stadium, view from mound, you know. And it's also where we can kind of tell how expensive will this be to make, you know, how many hours will I be committing to each of these scenes. We can kind of tell if we're going to have a wide open stadium view from mound, maybe if we say this is like a POV panning the crowd, then crowd, that might be more expensive to put down than a newspaper flopping and a picture of Lou giving the speech. So we're able to kind of figure out what are the stakes, how difficult is this going to be from this early process. We're starting to make those choices. Let's see. Oh, we got some stuff in the chat here. Damon's looking up the flop effect. That's wonderful. So where would we go from here? So if we've got, let's say we dive off from the newspaper example. If the newspaper flops down, there's a picture of Lou giving a speech, and you know, then he says, "I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." Where would we go with this? Would we zoom into the picture? We could. We'd say, all right, we're going to just, you know, push camera into picture, and it becomes live. Yeah, the Wizard of Oz goes from black and white. Picture changes to color and moving. So now we've entered into a scene, and we can kind of say, oh yeah, that might be difficult to make, but we'll figure it out. I'll say this, in this stage, don't worry about, can I do this, can I not do this? You're creating challenges here that you will likely solve during production. In this phase, you're able to dream as big as you'd like. You can come up with all sorts of wonderful things that you would put out there in this video phase. The next challenge is to convert these kinds of textual ideas, and we're going to turn them into we're going to turn them into pictures, and we turn them into pictures just by drawing them. And that's going to be the process of sort of storyboarding. And, you know, it's important to kind of go through those processes so that you know what you're actually going to be drawing. You could be just futzing away with nothing. You know, you spend a lot of hours drawing stuff. It's quicker to just write your ideas down. And we're looking to come up with some speed. Oh, yeah, and there's another one. So Andrew's saying, you know, you could have the paper fall on the mound, and then we pan up from there, which tells us someone is throwing newspapers, perhaps at Lou. You know, that could be a thing. So these are all things to consider when you get into here. And at this point, you'll notice that there's nothing about style. We haven't said anything about, you know, what it's actually going to look like. What do the characters look like? Are there characters? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm going to take a break here and have a look at the chat. We have some questions coming in about some things. Kevin Frayne is asking, he has a workflow question. He has just begun a new job and creates motion graphic videos and involves syncing things to music. How do I set up my project to sync to music yet allow for revision? So this is also something that is quite common. Whether you're syncing to music or syncing to a speech, there's still that audio that exists, right? There is a set thing that you're going to be going along with. Ooh, big burp from me. I'm just going to switch us back to stop looking at the script for now. When you're syncing with music, it's very similar to syncing to any kind of audio. The challenge, I suppose, is that with music, you might be doing things that are automatically kind of like going, if you're converting the audio to keyframes, and then you're using expressions to link things together. Is that the kind of syncing problem, or is the problem that the music will change? So is someone coming around and changing your music on it? Is that the trouble, I suppose? Just tell me what things actually change in your trubs. I'm just gonna move this. Ooh, that probably sucked. But let's see here. Yeah, so Grayson, Yeah, Grayson, let me know what specific workflow problems you run into. What are the changes that come down the pipe? In our pre-production, we also want to be considering how flexible we're going to be. In this Lou Gehrig example, each of these could be discrete scenes, and we kind of figure out, all right, where would there be a discrete scene break? And would that sort of be useful? Is it helpful to make things discrete? Are we trying to flow them together? Are there going to be hard cuts? Hard cuts are easier to edit around and to make revisions than highly complex transitions, right? So, now here we go. Problem is, I'll have some animation created, and then my supervisor will want to change something small. I have no problem making the change, however, it throws everything ahead off sync. I suppose that's true. I'm trying to figure out how that would work. Are we talking about inserting things? Is he saying, well, now you need to add a cat? You know, as I understand most revisions that have ever happened to me, it is change this element for something else. So I just removed that thing from where it is and put something else over top of it. If you work with a lot of pre-comps, that can be very helpful, so that you can just swap out the contents. I also often sync to music, make a timing change, a small thing. The video requires a massive redo to work. Easy way to adjust inserts, cuts on revision. That's interesting. I would have to see just exactly how you've got the project set up that it gets so jumbled when something needs to be changed. If you're looking at a timing change of things, I would definitely recommend you use things that are sort of drivers, and you use a lot of labels, so that you're able to know little markers to say, you know, when should this be happening, and don't be afraid to just cut layers. Like, the same layer doesn't have to be contiguous for the entire time, right? You could just snip, oh, this part, I'll snip that, and swap it out for something else. So that can be helpful. Yeah. Doop-a-doop-doo. Let's see, in character animation, it's not always 10 frames or 20 between movements. How can I define the time between movements? I don't know. That's getting a little bit off track. Let's tell you what. Let's try to keep it on. Let's keep it on pre-production talk in here. We'd like to remain focused. We got another about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll get it going. So, Studio XP is asking, do you create a rough visual representation of the animation before you make the final animation? Usually, I do. Yeah, that's what the animatic B. That's what an animatic is. Animatics are just taking the storyboard and converting the storyboard into something that moves, right? It's very, very helpful. So a storyboard is just a series of pictures. Could be a slideshow, could be anything. But the point is, when you look at them, you should have a clear indication, roughly, of what the final piece is going to look like. So that is very, very helpful before you go animating. It also helps you break things into discrete scenes. So maybe one day you could say, oh, I'm going to work on scene 8. Now I'm going to work on scene 12. Now I'm going to work on scene 15. And you know in your plan where those are going to actually fit in. So you don't have to work from the back to the front, right? It's not super useful to have things linear. Sometimes they have to be linear. Maybe you prefer animating in that way. It makes sense to do scene 1, then scene 2, then scene 3. But from a production standpoint, it makes more sense to either work on the things that you can do easiest or work on things that you can do hardest. So maybe one day you only have 2 hours to knock into this thing. So you want to break off discrete chunks, and you would only know that through pre-production and planning. So it's very important. So, how often do clients ask you to do design work versus bringing you a storyboard? 50-50, I suppose. Depends on what kind of client you're working for. There's no hard and fast rule there, Josiah. Sometimes you might find yourself working as only the production end. So you may not be doing any kind of pre-production at all. You might be just coming in, asked to execute. Here's a bunch of files, do them, do this. And they'll hopefully drop on you all of these documents, dropping on you, here's a bunch of style frames, here's a bunch of storyboards, here is Here's the VO that we're working with. Here's the AV script that brought us here. Hopefully someone can give you a package of all these things. Sometimes a client comes, and for me this happens all the time, they come to me with nothing, and we work together to somehow poop out a script, and then we somehow get everywhere else. So going through the whole process, but it's variable. So it really depends on who your clients are, how comfortable you are working with them. I would recommend getting comfortable with pre-production. You know, it is a nice thing to work on. If you want to have control of a project, you better learn it. So it's worth doing. All right, let's see. Raitlin is asking, are you always showing animatic to client to avoid pushbacks? Yeah, it's not necessarily to avoid pushbacks. I show the animatic to clients because that's part of the process. Part of the process it avoids confusion. You know, pushback would be if they didn't already know what's going on. By the time I'm sending someone an animatic, they've already seen storyboards. Before I'm sending them storyboards, they've already seen an AV script. So there aren't a lot of surprises. No one is really surprised by, oh, I didn't expect this. Why is it all brown? And why are these colors this way? Why does the character look? They know, because we've talked about it. I've shown them stuff before. We know. So it's not, it's not that tough. So let's have a look here. What's up in the chat? Let me just take a moment. We might not open up After Effects at all. Pre-production actually happens way before you even touch After Effects, before you open up Illustrator. Pre-production are the phases that go down generally before production happens. So, thank you, Andrew, for catching that one. I have a very tiny window in which to actually see the chat here. I can't make out all of the things, so it's a good grab. Thanks for grabbing Lucas's question. How do you estimate your time? And part of that comes from experience, but a lot of it comes from this process, right? This pre-production process that we're doing. So what I'd like to do is jump back. I just want to maybe show how some of that would go down. So let's just jump right back to the desktop a little bit. What we can do is we can kind of estimate, and it's going to be different for you guys, right? And oh yeah, you think about all the transitions in pre-production as well. You think about everything in pre-production. You should have a plan for exactly how you're going to transition from one thing to another. You should know it all before you've even considered opening After Effects. How would you know what transition you're going to do unless you've thought about it? So when it comes to estimating your time, it's really important to go in here and to say, when you look at the video portion, to think, how difficult is it for me to accomplish this? And the AV script isn't all of that answer. The style frames are going to be another part of that answer. So when you look at the style frame and you read what's in your video description, and you can think, how difficult will it be for me to accomplish what I've written here in the style that I've written down, right? And you can sort of consider what is that actually going to take from you? Do you think it's 5 hours? Do you think it's 2 hours? Do you think it's 1 hour? There's a version of a newspaper flopping down, picture of Lou Gehrig giving speech and headlines of ALS diagnosis, where I just draw in Illustrator, a rectangle with some lines, and it's very quick. I could probably bang that out in an hour, right? But if you want the newspaper to flop more realistically, if you want the pages to ruffle a bit, if the wind is going to blow one of the corners, all of these decisions that you can make early can determine how long this will actually take you to do. And so you go through, since you've got it segmented into these little bits, you can much easier say, this one's probably going to be like 5 hours. Maybe this one will be 3 hours. And you just write that next to all of them. How long will it take me to do each of these scenes? And then you will know, you just add up all the numbers, and now you've got an assumption that is more realistic because you've already done some work to say, this is what I'm going to produce. This is how long it's going to take me to produce it. Now, you can then take this document with your estimated hours and say, dearest client, this is the beautiful thing we could produce together. It's going to take me this many hours, and I know that because I've looked at it, I've crunched the numbers. Right? So hopefully that makes sense. Yadira, I love that. It's the script before the drama. I love that. That's that's excellent. Yeah, I love that. Um, so, what do you do if you underestimate your time, Josiah? That's a great question, actually. When um, what you want to do is also, well, this is turning into more of a business talk, but Josiah, you want to, when you're talking to clients, say this to make this thing as I envision it will take this many hours. In your budget, you should allot for, 10 hours of revisions. Dear client, this price includes 10 hours of revisions. If you need more than 10 hours of revisions for whatever reason, it's going to cost you more money. So that is the discussion you need to have. Revisions are extra. You want to have those defined before you start doing work. You want to know what is the expectation about revisions. Am I going to give you a round for free? Is that built into the price? Is that part of it? Is it all extra? You need to define that early. It is really, really kind of important to set the ground rules. What's your safe word with this client? When when do you pull the ripcord? Have it in writing. Have people sign the paper so that everyone knows and is agreed to and has a reasonable understanding of what to expect from each other. I can't underscore that enough. To render the ambiguous absolute and to render the ambiguous contractual. Because if you are doing an exchange of services for money, then you need to know exactly what services, what is the expectation for the currency that someone will give to you. So that's something to know. Anyway, we get into the chat here. I'm just going to look. Rothu Joshi? I am really bad at names, guys. I'm the worst. Is that hourglass an hour? It is. Rothu, you were asking, is there a theory for motion graphics which covers pre-production to end state? There is a workflow principle that I subscribe to, and I believe the excellent Andrew Embry also subscribes to this, and I think he's talked about it a lot. The waterfall methodology of workflow. So if you're thinking of workflow in the broader context of workflow, we like to use the waterfall version. Now, it's called the waterfall because water falls down the waterfall and does not climb back up the waterfall. It doesn't do that. So once you go from the top down, we're falling, and we make a big splash at the bottom. The point is, after we've got a script, the script is locked. We're never going to revisit the script again because you've agreed that script is good. And then we're going to make an AV script. We're going further down the waterfall. And you agree the AV script is good, so it's locked. We're going to not touch that. That document is perfect. It's great. And then we move on and we give you some style frames. And now we've given you style frames and you've agreed this is the style we're going to go with. Wonderful. Now that is locked. We're not going to do anything else. We're still falling down the waterfall. And the point is that after we pass each of these gates, these milestones, that's it. That's where we're at, and you go through this agreement process so that people say, oh, I agree that is what I want. Let's move forward. Oh, I agree that's what I want. Let's move forward. Now, a lot of people would say, well, I don't have time for all this back and forth thing. Well, that's true, but do you have time to argue with people after? I don't know which you prefer. Do you want to spend a little bit of time to make people happy and set expectations now, or do you want to rush through and have potential sadness in the future? These are two things you have to trade off. Anyway, let's see. What else is going on here? Andrew, yeah, I can comment on contracts. Contracts are important. You should have one if you do this professionally, because contracts are the thing that tell people that you're doing work. You should send estimates. People agree to them. They sign them. It's actually mind-boggling to me that someone would not do that, because it's important. If you do anything as a job, especially a freelance job, people should be contractually obligated to pay you. It's important. Cool. Let's see. Reading. Let's see. How thorough, Zach is asking, Zach McNabb, thank you for the question. How thorough should you be with variations for a project? For example, he has several ideas for a particular element for a project in mind, but not sure when you should just pick something and move on. So, during our AV script time, we can write down infinite ideas. We can have, every column, every permutation of idea, right? And then we could start to refine those. We could say, well, what does a picture of this idea look like? Well, what does a picture of this idea look like? And you can look at all of the different permutations. You can sketch out some of the ones that are winners, and you can start to whittle it down. You can start to funnel into the one that you think is best. But you should do it iteratively. You should do the least amount of work to give yourself the clearest idea of that thing. Now, maybe that means you're really on the fence. Oh, these three ideas are all my darling. I have to see each of them in their final perfect form to know which one will bring me the most joy. I think that comes with experience, is knowing when to destroy some of the things that will not be beautiful, or in your subjective opinion will not be beautiful, and then you destroy them. Ultimately, time is the thing that will compress most of your decision making, to say, pick a direction, let's go there. Especially if it's the kind of thing that's holding up, how do I get out of this scene? It depends on how the scene is, and you have 3 different variations, so you need to pick one to move the thing ahead. But thinking flexibly is helpful. So if I'm going to use a certain mode of transition, I'm going to turn the subject into a circle, and then the circle will expand to fill the screen, then, that would be a perfectly fine thing you could do, and you can do that to just about anything, depending on how you've drawn the things. But when it comes down to, do I need to choose one of these 3 things? Absolutely. But you can make the choice easier by maybe actually storyboarding each of those interesting scenes out, and then you can decide, that one goes away. So, what do we got here? Vinicius is saying, contract isn't important. It's mandatory. That's right. That's right. The contract party is the best party because a contract party is mandatory. Oh, man. So today we're trying to keep it back on the pre-production train. We've gotten a little bit into the business weeds at the moment. Business weeds. What kind of quandaries do people have about the pre-production process? I feel like I am losing a lot of the comments that are just whizzing by in the chat, and I've missed some of them. We should have done. I should have made business talk one of the topics to vote on. Maybe that would have been pretty good. A lot of folks are asking about some plugins. I will say this in our pre-production chat about pre-production things. In this pre-production phase, we're able to say, oh, do I need a third-party plugin for this? Or we could say, oh, what kind of actual software do I need to use? I know a lot of y'all are coming around here because you are After Effects nerds just like me, but I will say that After Effects isn't the only solution to motion graphics animation. In your pre-production, you might find, oh, I need a true 3D solution for this. Oh, it would be easiest to start doing some cell hand-drawn animation. And so then you can start to decide, well, what tools do I really need to enlist for these problems? So that is what's important. So, yeah. Oh yes, we will. I believe we will definitely. We'll definitely be doing a talk about business later. People do like that. Joseph, you're asking, do I storyboard most projects or do I mock it up on After Effects? That's It's interesting. I've had a lot of time crunches recently where storyboarding has been very rushed and I'm just pooping my ideas out. And sometimes it's easiest if I just make things quickly in After Effects using rudimentary shapes and just conveying the motion and the shape and the framing. And I send that on. People are like, oh, yeah, I understand. That works. Let's do it. So sometimes that is useful. But yeah, let's see. What do we got in the chat here? What do I do when a client gives no input into the visuals? Where they basically just make a motion graphics videos like hitting the easy button. Well, 8-bit Okie, the answer to your question is I pick up a telephone and I call them, hello, and I say, hey, here's some visual directions I think we could go in. Are you willing to sign to one of those? Are you willing to commit? Does one of those sound good to you? And then they would say, I don't know, I actually don't like that. And I say, well, that's great, because maybe there are things you do like. Here's some style frames. And we talk about style frames. Good segue to get into what's called a style frame. I'm not going to draw any, because that would be time consuming. But a style frame is conveying as much of the finished look as you possibly can to someone. And maybe a style frame is here's some pictures on Google that I think are similar to what you want to see, right? You shouldn't pass off other people's work as your own. Definitely say, here's some samples of other people's work. We can do something like those. What do you think? That is an avenue to go. The point is that you want to convey the final style as best you can before you commit to that creative direction. And it's sort of useful to tell that story. So hopefully that answers your question about visual direction. In the lack of a direction, choose one, communicate it, then follow it. Communicate it is the one that's in caps when you transcribe this, everybody. All right. So, there's a question. Do you develop a... Mikahiz? No. Mika. Oh, Mika is my name. Oh, well, Mika, do I develop a full style frame for each scene or just enough style frames to give an idea of what the overall video will look like? The second one. If you were to do a style frame for every scene, that's a storyboard, right? And you don't need to do that in a style frame. You need to convey the style, show the significant parts to communicate the fullest version of the final thing with the least amount of effort. So that's the goal, right? When do you need to buy stock photos? When do you make a budget estimate about it? Do you set a fixed price for the beginning? Again, we're getting back into the business weeds, guys. Monica, what's great about a lot of sort of licensing things now, Monica, I'm gonna plug Adobe Stock here really quick. I do enjoy that you can pull Adobe Stock elements. It's all watermarked, so you haven't paid any licensing on it yet. You can show the client, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Do you want to license this? This much money. We know it. We know it, and you can see it in context with a little watermark on it, and they know. So you can quickly estimate a budget. You are hopefully able to come up with a budget based on an AV script that should give you a reasonable understanding. When it comes to estimating sort of what people are into, what they're willing to spend, it's very helpful to have some of this pre-production process, fleshed out. It is still hours that you're putting into a thing without having any confirmed billing on it, but that's some of the risk you need to take. You have to be able to communicate effectively what are you going to do for this person and how much is that going to cost. So yeah. Studio XP, hey, what is your setup when you make your asset folder? Studio, I saw that question. I'm getting to it, but thank you for asking it many times. We will get around. So when I set up a bunch of asset folders, I tend to do it by scene. So if the scenes are, well, here's scene 1, here's scene 2, here's scene 3. So in After Effects, here's a bunch of bins, and the bins are scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. So I usually go by bins. You will always have common elements that pervade many scenes, and you should have a common bin. That's a place to put it. When it comes to actually organizing files, that's pretty subjective. And a lot of this stuff is subjective because it really depends on how you personally organize information. If it's easier for you to find characters by having a characters folder than it is to have a scenes folder and then scenes in that folder, characters, that's on you. But for me personally, I do it scene by scene because usually I'm not reusing a lot of elements in each scene. But that's how I do. Oh, Ruben says nice audio. I'm not sure if you're being sarcastic, Ruben, because we've had a lot of gripes about audio today. A lot of audio not in sync, a lot of left channel only stuff. I'm running this through a delightful Focusrite I/O deck, and I'll be honest, I don't know how to do a lot of audio things, so we'll fix it up on the next stream, I'm sure. What I need to do is duplicate that. I don't know. It's not important. But let's go through. We got about 15 more minutes here. So let's see. What else have people got going on in the questions? Oh boy, Hugo, you're getting very philosophical. Hugo asked, "Do you always feel secure in the work you're doing? Do you always feel the need to be good? Uh, when it's not so, what do you do?" Hugo, I don't know. I'm a very secure person, so I feel that my work is usually pretty excellent. I think everybody struggles with the feeling of, oh, this is not great. But I'll say this: if you feel lost, if you feel like you're not doing good, reference back to your pre-production elements. All right, I'm going to always segue your questions back to pre-production because that's what today's topic is. If you feel, oh, this project's getting off the rails, we have the pre-production stuff so that we can go back and say, is the thing I'm making accomplishing the original intent of the piece? Rather than thinking, oh, am I good? I think, is the piece good? And what am I doing to serve the intent of the piece? So that's that, you know. And I'll say this, not all pieces are going to be beautiful. Not all pieces are going to be, oh, wow, it's so great. Get it up on the Instagram, you know. Some things are, you know, just to be paid to do them. And if you execute it well, if you execute the brief, if you do what the creative director said well, everybody high fives and you go for drinks later, then that is a win. So whether it is beautiful or wonderful or not, whether it's good, whether you feel good, you can always feel good if the client is happy. You know, you got to feel good about that. You know, if you get paid for your labor, you got to feel good about that. So, you know, the story I always tell is I have a grandfather who was a bricklayer for 65 years. That was the only career he ever had. Never once in his life did he wonder, am I good at bricklaying? He wondered, am I good at providing for my family every day? And that was his thought. So I try not to sweat too much about how amazing I might be at something. Just the me today is better than the me yesterday, you know, and, you know, got to roll with that. So what do we got in the chat? Let's take it up with the chat here. Satisfying voice. Oh, thank you. This is becoming an ASMR kind of thing. Oh, now we're getting more biz-based questions. Let's see. Malongo is asking, do you carve out time to work on new stuff, or do you just focus on learning stuff via client projects? I sometimes have time. In the summer, I have more time than in the winter to experiment, to try new things. I try to leave like one day a week where I can mess around with stuff. I actively enjoy experimenting and trying new things and you know, new softwares, new techniques, revisiting old techniques, seeing what new technology has done to them. So for me, that's a relaxing time to futz around and just poke at stuff and, you know, make things that look interesting or new ways to create things. So for me, that's kind of a brain relaxer. I like to apply that stuff. I like to push myself on client pieces. I come up with concepts for a client work that I don't necessarily have all the answers to, and then I go solve those problems. You know, I create my own nightmares during client projects, but it kind of pushes me to deliver on those things, so it's helpful. I don't recommend everybody do that. That's not great for your heart, but it's fun. Boop, boop, boop. Let's see. What do we got going here? Back to the AV script. Andrew wants to return to the AV script. We've already moved past it. We've talked about style frames already. Yeah, so let's see. What else we got here? Do I love my designer's life? Thank you. Oh, that's name that is characters. Cannot read that, but yeah, that's right, Andrew. We can definitely jump back into the into the script. What I might do is actually just share the link and see what people populate it with. But let's see, what do we got? We got about 10 minutes here. We should go back. We should talk about a few final things in the AV script. Oh, Korean. Hey, all right. Well, 안녕하세요. Thanks for coming out. You know, I love that. Your soccer team's going pretty well. You know, they knocked Germany out, and I love that. So, I think the mic is mono. I don't know what's up with the audio, but we are going to go back to We are going to go back to the AV script real briefly. There were some questions in the chat. People were asking quandaries about. People were asking about transitions and character. So, when do you know you need to transition from one discrete scene to another? That's kind of a thing. So you'll notice I've kind of blocked this stuff out into kind of each sentence has its own bar here, and we have these spaces that are in between paragraphs. Now, usually when you're writing, a paragraph is a separation of a distinct idea, so those can be a good evaluator for when do we need to have some kind of discrete transition into something else. And it's kind of important to kind of be true to the thoughts of the piece. We could do a very elegant, very fancy transition between, who wouldn't consider it an honor to have known Jacob Rupert, also the builder of baseball's greatest empire, Ed Barrow. You can have a really wacky transition between those. But notice how all of these sentences are of a similar structure. You would probably want to have a similar transition between each of those. So, like I keep saying, here in this phase, you're planning that out. I don't think we would do sort of a melting dissolve and then someone hits a baseball and we follow the baseball and then, the whole scene warps into something else here. We'd probably just do something simple between these because these are connected ideas. This is kind of a punctuation right here and tells us maybe this should be some kind of a punctual transition to this. So when you look at these things, it can be really helpful for you to come up with ideas that are going to work in the context of the script. So if you're thinking of where do transitions go, well, they go here. And you would say transition, colon, and then what that transition is. How do you intend to get from one scene to another? How do you get from one frame to another? Most motion graphics is just bouncing from one discrete frame to another, and how do you get from one thing to the next thing, And yeah, Marcos is asking, where did you study? You're the boss of the expression. First YouTuber with the real data. I guess so. I studied at the University of Ottawa. It's a terrific university. I studied communication and business with the thought that I would work in advertising. That did not happen. I took a few practical courses there, ended up on a co-op program, and the rest, as they say, is history. But anyway, that's about that. More reminders that the microphone is only on the left. I guess. I don't know how to make this microphone mono. There's no button for that. So let's see. Ooh, here we go. Deep Freeze. Deep Freeze is asking, how do you approach a project if the needed output is an abstract form of animation like shapes, only for communicating or expressing an important message? All right, so that's also important. We could be writing, so let's say the message is still Lou Gehrig talking, right? What if we could use the same script and do it abstractly? No newspapers, no stadiums, what is an abstract representation of time and disease? You could have that. So you might be having things that are very abstract. But you can express that all here in the script. The structure doesn't really change. You know, the structure of how you would approach these things is not different. The content you'll write in here is different, and it will affect later things, but whether it's abstract, whether it's literal, abstraction, literalization, these are both on a spectrum, and all motion graphics pieces fall somewhere on that spectrum. So you might be coming up with concepts that are abstract and some that are not. Oh, I can open the advanced audio properties, the gear icon right next to the mic. Okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing that. Cheap ass reviews, I am doing that thing. So I'm going to click on the thing next to the gear. Then I go to properties. Okay, I'm there. And then down mix to audio. Yeah, that is not there. Gear icon next to your mic. Yes. Focusrite. Gear. Nah, man, that doesn't do anything. So we'll fix it up for next time. Never mind this audio bananas. You know, it is what it is today. So Kevin is asking, how do you decide when to make a new pre-comp? My first 2-minute video I made was done primarily in one composition, so any adjustment would throw everything ahead of it out of sync. Well, Kevin, you can decide when to make a new pre-comp based... it's sort of based on what makes sense for you. So if you have, for example, a character, probably put them in their own pre-comp, right? Those are things that need to be together. Or if there are things, for example, we might say, even based on our AV script, all of this should be in its own pre-comp. Everything before the transition, put that in a pre-comp, right? That's going to make sense because that should stand on its own. It should be separate from these other things, right? If it's a discrete element that can be moved or transposed or separated, that doesn't interact with other things, put it in its own bin. You know, I am a huge proponent of keeping things lean, having an assembly space, probably because my earliest exposure to video was through editing rather than through animation. So coming from an editor's perspective, you want things to be in chunks, in discrete chunks. This scene is in a chunk full of these shots, and you know, these scenes together make up an act, and that can be a chunk. You know, when do you chunkify this stuff? And it's kind of important, especially when working with music, for example. Shouldn't the chorus be a chunk? Is that a chunk? Is a verse a chunk you can put together? Are each line you're doing? I used to do lyric videos for a while. That was not fun. But the point is, that helps you to compartmentalize things. You know, this line of the song can be compartmentalized. You know, this grouping, the bridge, compartmentalized. So put the things in compositions that can be reasonably... I keep hitting the microphone. Oh my God. Anyway, hopefully that helps. But the trouble is, you're going to end up with desynchronization with the beats if you end up bumping those things around. So use markers on your timeline. Use those sweet, sweet markers to make that happen. Cheap-ass reviews. Don't worry about derailing. Other people have already handled that. So we got about 2 minutes here. Any other tiny questions? What quandaries do we still have about what's going down? Oh, you're very welcome, Kevin. I'm glad that's a good time. Big smiles. So yeah, as the 10 to 20 second delay continues, hard to know. About how many revisions on average do you tend to have? Robin, I don't mean to brag, but I'm pretty amazing, and we only usually have one round. So, you know, that's about how things go down. And usually it's no revisions. Because, I'll say this, it's because I'm communicative throughout the process. The final animation is not a surprise, because all the other steps have already been seen. No one is surprised when the final comes out. So, all right. Yeah, Kevin. Could I give you my phone number? No, that I'm going to hide and delete some of my Skype stuff. Anyway, big jokes. Hit me up on the Twitter if you're ever stuck on things, at EC Abrams on there. I'm usually there. Find me in the Slack channel. I'm on the Motion Slack. Find me there. Come on, hit me up. But yeah, so hopefully today has been useful. We got a little derailed into the business weeds, and that happens. That happens. Oh, is there a talk about waterfall technique? I would say Google waterfall workflow, sift through the many tech blogs, and read it there. People talk about it a lot. So that'll do it for today's live stream. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Especially a friend of the show, Andrew. I love having you in the stream, man. Always great questions, very insightful. So it's great. And cheap ass reviews. We'll have to talk about paid plugins another time because I got to go to lunch. It is Canada Day weekend, so I'm hitting a patio. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This has been great. If you came in late to the live stream, it's going to be archived here as soon as YouTube is done doing number crunchery on it, and then it'll be live here for all time and space. You can see all my blunders, and hopefully you've enjoyed that. We should be looking at my face when I sign off. That would be much better. So thank you again. Thanks for everybody from all around the world. Get out there, enjoy your weekend, make great stuff, and if you enjoy this kind of thing, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and you will find out when it happens. Hey, big thanks to all of you guys. Y'all make it happen. So thank you again for watching, and have a great day.